From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
All right, welcome back. My name is John, and this is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption. We are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our old episodes or previous episodes, maybe old, at yourunpodcast.com, as well as all the other great shows that are on the You Run Podcast Network. With me this week and every week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster podcast, and his name is Sean. And Sean, have you been nice this week?
You wouldn't like me when I'm angry, John.
We're mixing two different movies, neither of which I think we watched this week. But how you doing? What have you been up to this week, Sean?
It's been a good week. It's been a good week if you like wrestling, because I watched a lot of wrestling shit because we didn't get to talk about some of it. Oh, before I even start to get into the wrestling, I watched something. I'm not a big, I have, just to preface this, I have two kids, 12 and 13, and I'm not the kind of dad that like pushes my interests on them. Of course, I would love it if they like the stuff I like, but
you're going to watch the nostril picker or you're not going to have dinner
for a week.
Yep. Eat boogers, kids.
Eat boogers and like them, goddammit. So we ended up watching, since the last time we recorded, all three Back to the Future movies in a row. I don't know what, not in a marathon session, but three separate, each night was a different movie.
Yeah.
And my older daughter, I guess they watched it at school before their spring break. And she was like, oh yeah, we watched, but we didn't get to finish it. So I only got to see up to this one point. And
she watched all of them or just
the first one? Just the first hour of the first one, which is weird because I kind of explained like when I was a kid. I don't know if you had this, but when I first went into middle school, junior high, that's when they started Channel 1. They provided all of the school with TVs in all the rooms. And when they would show a movie, they just show it over that system that they played Channel 1 over. So, first through 6th hour, you would just watch the same movie for first hour, second hour, a new movie, third and fourth, like right before a holiday or something. For Christmas or Easter
I didn't
or whatever.
have that in my school, but I understand the concept of what you're saying. We just had the big metal CRT TV that they wheeled in on like a
big cart AV cart.
Yeah. Anyway,
so we watched we watched all three of them, and went over pretty well. I was really surprised that they indulged me and let me watch it. So my older daughter liked it, which was cool. She was like, I didn't think I would like it, but I did. It was pretty cool. And she was kind of into it. My other daughter was not into it. And she was like, I don't want to watch this. Do we have to watch this? But she sat and watched it. She didn't make a big fuss about it. So kudos on that. We got to the last movie and the younger one was like on the edge of her seat to see how it ended before, not going to spoil Back to the Future in case anybody hasn't seen it, which that would be a travesty. But before when they're doing the train thing and they're trying to go back to 1985 from 1885, she was like sitting on the edge of her seat. I thought that was kind of funny.
I was going to ask if you're a big fan of that franchise, or I'm kind of lukewarm on it. Like I don't have any negative feelings towards it, but it's also not one that I ever really find myself wanting to go back and revisit.
I like them a lot. And I think it hit in 1985, I think is when the first one came out. So I was like 8 and I remember seeing it in the theater, and my sister and I went and saw it and we watched all the movies. When they say like to be continued or whatnot, it took 5 years for them to actually, or 4 years or whatever it was, to actually put out the second movie. So I don't think it's not like in my pantheon of movies that I have to watch, but I do enjoy it. And when they showed for one of the, I think it was 2015, they had for the 30-year thing, they showed it in theaters, and I went with a couple friends and we watched like the marathon. They showed all three in a row. I mean, I like it. I'm not a major fan, but there were things like even this time that I watched it that I never noticed. The one that I was going to text you about and I didn't is in the first movie, they're driving, when he first goes back to the future, back to 1955 or whatever, and he crashes into that farm, Peabody's farm with the Twin Pines and stuff. He crashes into the barn, and the farmer is the crazy old grandpa from Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I was like,
it's a good touch.
Yeah, I was like, I got to text John. And I didn't text you because I wanted to wait to tell you about it today. I just thought that was really funny. Other than that, like I said, Wrestler Corner for me, I watched Dark Side of the Ring, the Terry Gordy episode, which was about the Fabulous Freebirds, which they weren't in WWE, so I didn't really know a whole lot about them. I mean, I knew who they were, and I knew that they had eventually kind of transitioned to WWE, but I just wasn't very familiar with them. I watched the Brutus the Barber Beefcake Dark Side of the Ring 2. That just aired a couple days ago as of the time that we're recording this.
Didn't they do a biography on him too? I thought I started the bio on him because I watched the DDP one, but I started Brutus, but I didn't read it. Yeah, but I didn't finish it.
Well, Brutus the Barber Beefcake was on Dark Side of the Ring.
I thought
DDP
that was on.
and Davy Boy Smith were the biographies since the last time we talked about them.
Those flipped. I think you got those flipped because I know DDP I watch, but I'm positive that I just let it roll into Brutus the Barber, but I turned it off for something stupid.
You gonna make me look it up now?
I think I am. Do we have a bet on this? Is there like, do I owe you like a beer or like a hot dog or something? If
Yeah, I'll take it.
okay,
Hot dog.
beer and a hot dog. Hot dog. Okay.
Episode 3 of Dark Side of the Ring, Terry Gordy, Final Fight of the Freebird. Episode 4, drum roll please. I don't think we have a drum roll on here, but how's that? We Brutus the Barber Beefcake, episode 4.
What's on bio then?
It was what I told you, DDP and Davy Boy Smith.
Yeah, I still don't believe you, but I guess I owe you a hot dog.
Miss what is it? Fake news.
Yeah, fake news. Absolutely.
So, and I watched those too. I watched DDP and Davy Boy Smith. Big fan. I watched WCW in the 90s, so that was my wrestling choice, I guess. I didn't really watch much of the Attitude Era, but I knew of The Rock and Stone Cold and the Generation X and all that stuff. But I kind of attached myself to DDP a little bit. And I, all the stuff that he's done since wrestling with all the DDP yoga and rehabilitating wrestlers who were kind of down and out. That's his legacy. And I thought that was a pretty good episode. It was a good message, never count yourself out kind of thing. And Davy Boy Smith, I knew about British Bulldog, and that was an interesting one. Did you see that one at all?
Now that you said it, I'm switching them. I started British Bulldog and I only got like 10 minutes into it. So
okay.
I do owe you a hot dog.
Nice.
Too many B's. British Bulldog, Brutus the Barber. It's just
Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Triple B's on that one. British Bulldog too.
5 B's in 2 episodes.
I know, it's crazy. But I knew like when British Bulldog, when Davy Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid were the tag team champs in WWF and all that stuff, I knew about them. And when Davy Boy disappeared from WWF and eventually came back as British Bulldog, I was like, I remember this guy. Why was he gone for so long? I just didn't know his whole story about wrestling for Bret Hart's dad and all that stuff in Calgary. So they were just really interesting episodes. Last thing I'll mention that I just watched today was the Dave Attell special, Hot Cross Buns, on Netflix.
So I don't want to hear a lot about that because I haven't gotten a chance to watch it yet. I saw that pop up in there yesterday. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet. Is it? So I've seen Dave Attell like live recordings, and I've seen him be really like on, and I've seen him be like almost like they don't capture the energy of what that comedian is. Does this at least do a good job for the special?
Yeah, I thought it was a good special. I laughed a lot. I thought it was pretty good. He's pretty sharp.
I always thought that. I mean, I think he's one of the more sharp and one of the better working comedians out there. And I like that he had that TV show that we talked about, probably November, December. So one of us, I think I started watching, and then you kind of piggybacked on it and like powered through it too.
Yeah.
He had that show that was on for like 2-3 years, but I don't feel like he ever quite broke like a Seinfeld did, or Chappelle, or even a Burr or one of those. Like he never quite hit that second and third level of like super famous comedian. Like I feel like he's the comedian's comedian, if that makes any sense.
I'd agree with you. I feel like he's definitely really well regarded in that circle, but he just never kind of capitalized on the success of having Insomniac. And I know he did Dave's Old Porn, and then he did that show.
Oh, I liked that show. That was a funny show.
He did the roast show with Jeffrey Ross. But yeah, I didn't watch that much.
Dave's Old Porn. I'm going to have to look for that. That was a good show.
Yeah, good luck finding that. Good luck.
Yeah.
That's probably
I would think so.
Scrubbed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I doubt he'd be the one scrubbing it. He doesn't seem too concerned about it.
No, so. I'm sure he doesn't give a shit. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I watched. Lots of wrestling content, Back to the Future, all 6 hours of it.
Well, for me, I tried to start a new show. It's the show that's on Netflix that popped up. That's like, it's apparently some kind of physical competition. And I think if I had not gotten pissed off at it, it probably would have turned in just a bunch of exercise shit. But it's called Physical 100. And apparently season 2 is on there, but I didn't watch season 1. I'm like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to miss if I don't start at the beginning. It's only 1 season. So I started it, and I got like, I think there's literally 100 contestants on this fucking show, because it's dubbed like a Godzilla movie is the nicest way I can say it. And it's like, I got 40 minutes into it, and all it was all these really different kinds of physically fit people walking and going, oh, this guy's really fit. Oh, this guy is also really fit. Oh, you look really fit. Oh, I'm afraid of you. Oh, it's...
Oh, you know that guy?
Yeah, all that type of shit. Like after 40 minutes, I looked at my wife. I'm like, I've been watching people say hello to each other for 40 fucking minutes. I'm over this show, and just kind of sunk back into a Seinfeld like malaise of like, well, I can watch this. If I'm not going to think, at least I'll like get a laugh at this every like couple minutes.
I got 3 episodes into it, or maybe 4, and it was just enough. The actual physical competition of it is kind of compelling, but there are so many like reaction shots. It's all in Korean, so they're all like Korean fitness celebrities or whatever, influencers and different stuff.
I wasn't sure what the actual nationality was. I just knew it was some kind of Asian, and I don't mean that to sound shitty. I was like, I don't know what this is. I just know it's not that. It's one of those.
There's just so much of them, not gossiping, but kind of the comments that they make during these competitions. Oh, what's he going to do next? And it's like they have 5 male voice actors and 5 female voice actors, and they just cycle them throughout all these 100 people. You know, obviously they don't make a man say a woman's lines or whatever, but it's just the same voices over and over again.
If they did.
That would be kind of funny, actually.
People
mix it up a little bit.
But yeah, I made it about 40 minutes into that and was like annoyed with it, and was like, I don't care what this is anymore. Honestly, my thought was maybe Sean's seen this and he'll tell me if it's worth going back to. But
yeah, I didn't make it very far.
Okay. More interesting, what I did go to a theater, and saw the new Ghostbusters movie, Frozen Empire. I am a fan of that franchise, and you know, I have a lot of I think like you were saying with that other Back to the Future just 2 minutes ago. That's a franchise I very much so grew up with, and there's only 3 Back to the Futures. For the longest part of my life, there were only the 2 Ghostbuster movies, so it's not like they were ever overkilled or, you know, they're not like James Bond or Fast and the Furious. You're like, Jesus, I got another one of these to watch, or Marvel movies like we spoke about recently. So I was moderately geeked to see it, because short version is we had some plans fell through. I was like, well, we're home, we might as well go see this. I don't want to ruin it, because it is so, like, at the time of us recording this, it's only like been out for like a week. So by the time this comes out, it will be about maybe a month old at that point. So I don't want to ruin it, but I'll say it leaves for me a bit to be desired. It's very long, and that sounds like a common, like I say that every week, I feel like, but I don't feel like a Ghostbusters movie needs to be pushing 2 hours and 15 minutes. That's kind of a lot. And a lot of that comes down to some of the problems that are in the movie. Like, they feel like they need to shoehorn every cast member that we've seen from every Ghostbusters movie except for the girl one into this movie. And the majority of them don't really have anything to do other than coming in saying, hey, remember this? You know, it force feeds a lot of nostalgia, which was kind of my gripe on Afterlife. Is just so heavy handed on trying to, you know, do you remember what we did 30 fucking years ago? Well, here we are again. That type of shit.
Hey, it's Peter Venkman.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, you remember Egon? He's dead, but we're going to make you cry about him.
Here's his ghost.
Adult. Right. I was hoping that, I mean, I kind of gave it a pass in Afterlife, even though it did bother me. I was like, you know what? They're working something out of their system. This movie's not bad. It just feels like Goonies with Ghostbusters and overkill on, you know, nostalgia shit. So I was hoping with this one, like, maybe they'll flesh out these characters a little more. Maybe they'll, you know, focus more on like a new villain, a new story, blah, 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 all that type of stuff. And yes and no, they do have a new villain. There is like a lot of new things in there. Of course, they get some new gadgets and all that shit. Paul Rudd's delightful as always, because he's Paul Rudd. You know, there's a lot of good things in it, but the further away I get from it, the more I just kind of feel like, you know, and I, like I said, I'm not going to break down plot points on it. If we ever want to do that, we can do it on a full episode. But if you still like the franchise, if you liked Afterlife, definitely check it out. If you didn't like Afterlife or didn't see Afterlife, I'd say watch that one first, because it's probably quite a bit cheaper to see right now, and then decide if you like that, go for it. So, did you like Afterlife? I don't even know if we have ever talked about you seeing that one.
Didn't see it.
No? Okay.
I liked Ghostbusters a lot, but I feel like I don't need... That was one of those ones where I felt like I didn't need to see any continuation of it.
Well, it's a continuation of it, but it's a very different, like, the bottom line with the franchise right now, like, the last 2 movies are kids movies. They're family films. They're not, and you know, for me, Ghostbusters was a family film, but I think that's family film by like 1980, when I saw it, probably like 1988 standards, you know, not 2024 standards. Like, all the stuff that's in that, I didn't really get all the adult jokes in that movie until way later in life. This movie and the last one too are very much so, and very obviously aimed at that, like, I'd say probably 12 to like 15 is probably their core like demographic. Like, old enough not to be scared, but like young enough not to be annoyed by things that old people get annoyed by, if that makes sense.
It makes sense as an old person.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of stuff in it that if I had kids and I took them to see this, there's so much stuff that you're going to recognize from the previous movies that you're going to be like, well, it's got something for mom and dad too, or whatever. But I bought a stupid Stay Puft Marshmallow Man popcorn bucket, which is going to be my candy dish for by the bar now. So that's good. That's $25 well spent, I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
The only other thing I watched was similar title to this, but I watched the original Roadhouse movie just because I like it. And again, I don't feel the need to break that down right now, but I wanted to kind of go into this having watched the other one beforehand. That probably was a mistake on my part, but I think we're going to take a break and then we'll come back and get into all the mistakes I've made in my life over the last week or so and talk about the movie Roadhouse from 2024. If you have a soft spot for nostalgia and all things pop culture related, then you need to check out Video Tasties on YouTube. You can find them at the You Run Podcast Network and also at youtube.com/@videotasties. Video Tasties features theatrical versus extended cut content, as well as retrospectives on TV shows, movies, video game reviews, and throwbacks. Basically, if it's anything from your past that you want to go back and relive, Video Tasties has a video for you that can let you do that.
And they're a member of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find them at yourunpodcast.com.
Part shapeshifter, part vampire. It's a monster. A vampire is a monster.
We need your help to finish Vampire.
We need you to give us money so that we can give a finger to bad movies.
Now more than ever, people want new flavors of movies. We want to see new perspectives, new points of view.
And if we can all join together and support films that we actually want to see, then maybe everyone can make a vampire one day.
All right, so we are back in. As we mentioned, we are going to be talking about the, occasionally male nudity prone Roadhouse 2024. No dong, but plenty of Conor McGregor ass strutting around like a dipshit. This is a really new movie, so we'll go ahead and put it out there right from the beginning. Spoiler warning, if you haven't already figured out, for us to talk about this movie, we're going to probably have to talk about some things that happen in this movie. So if you haven't seen this yet, it is on Amazon Prime.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, well, it's on Amazon Prime, and if you have Prime, it's free. And I don't know if this is still the case, but when I watched it, they have you watch one ad at the beginning and then you just play through. So it's not too bad. We start with a third-party review, and this time we're going with a review from Ross, the co-star of the show Friends. And he says, who decided to inflate Conor McGregor's bursting ego further by casting him in this fucking film? It's horrible. 0.5 star out of 5.
It stinks.
Yeah. So Ross is a very grumpy Friends cast. Sean, what's this movie about?
All right, so if we go over to IMDb, we talk about the storyline, we talk about the plot. Just to mention, this is the #1 ranked movie out of something on IMDb, up 21 spots. It has a 6.2 out of 10 rating from 62,000 reviews. And again, storyline, plot, you know the drill. They're both the same this week. It says ex-UFC fighter Dalton takes a job as a bouncer at a Florida Keys roadhouse, only to discover that this paradise is not all it seems.
Is this the first movie that we've had that's been one out of question mark on this? I think Terrifier 2 was in the top 10 when we talked about it, but I can't think of any others that might have been in the top 10, let alone one.
I'd have to go back in the archives.
That's probably not worth doing.
I feel like there was something that we talked about that had come out relatively recently that was up there in at least the top 10. I feel it has to be. There has to be one of those movies. Maybe Batman or something.
Yeah,
we did talk about Batman. Remember
we
that?
did talk about Batman. Yeah, go in the
Batman.
way back machine. Yes. I want to start on this one just by kind of talking about the original movie just briefly, because I don't think you can, because this is a remake or a reboot or whatever we're calling it. Same thing, in my opinion, remake and reboot. I don't think you can really talk about this movie without at least kind of acknowledging the fact that it's supposed to be a spinoff of another movie. Do you have an opinion on the original Roadhouse movie, or is it one that you don't have an opinion on? Or frankly, I assume you've seen it. I don't even know for sure.
John, I always have an opinion.
Well, that doesn't mean you've seen it.
No, I have seen it. I've seen it quite a few times. I mean, it's a Patrick Swayze movie. It's pretty much the height. I would say it's the pinnacle of Patrick Swayze's career. And Roadhouse is really generally, I think you'd probably agree, really highly revered as being this like action, beat 'em up, brawler kind of movie where Patrick Swayze plays Dalton again, that is this philosophical kind of fighter who works at a roadhouse, a bar, essentially, and has to
double dose.
Yeah, and tries to clean the place up of the ruffians and the riffraff. There's a dude that I don't remember what he exactly is, but he's trying to...
It's Jackie Treehorn.
Yes, but he's trying to run out the owners or something.
It's like a
town,
mob
right?
guy who's trying to run, basically. And that's very extremely loosely something that's kind of explored in this movie. For me, like the original Roadhouse, I don't know if I would go as far to call it a guilty pleasure because I don't feel guilty liking that movie. Like I thoroughly enjoy that movie. It's kind of one of those, like, you throw it in a bucket and say, like, if Roadhouse is on, I'm probably going to just leave it because it's Roadhouse and it's an entertaining movie. And I don't know anyone who would say, like, oh, this is a fucking masterpiece of cinema. I'm not going that far. I'm not claiming
I'm sure
that.
there's someone that would say that. But it's definitely one of those movies when it comes on, you can just watch it. We've probably seen it between us so many times that you could catch it at any point and be like, oh, this hasn't happened yet. I'm going to watch this part because I like it or whatever.
And it's fun. It's kind of what in a lot of ways, it's the ideal action movie because, like you just said, you can put it on at pretty much any point. You can kind of watch it. You know what's going on all the time. You don't have to overthink it, and it's fun. So with that in mind, we get a reboot of this movie in 2024 starring Jake Gyllenhaal, who's fine in this movie. I don't have any real problem with him. And for some reason, and I'm sure it's because UFC gave him a bunch of money to do it, they decided to make him an ex-UFC fighter. And he's apparently had a bad fight. I'll just leave it at that so I don't spoil what he does or doesn't do.
They don't really get into it much, though. They kind of touch on it, but they don't go as in detail as you would expect.
Yeah, and truthfully, listening to like a couple other people talk about it, that's, you know what, I'm just going to say it because I don't want to beat around the bush like totally on it. In the movie, it's kind of heavily implied that he kills a guy in the ring, but it's not flat out said like that. There's a lot of people who are taking it as like, no, he did kill a guy in the ring. And I don't think it really makes that big of a difference because, frankly, I don't think the UFC angle in this movie really adds anything of merit. It adds a backstory. But frankly, when we get to the point of the movie that we're supposed to care about in this, because this is a reboot of Roadhouse where he's supposed to be at the bar wrestling dipshits and doing whatever, I don't really care about him being a UFC fighter. I guess it explains why he can fight or why he's all, buffed up and all that stuff. But I don't really feel like it adds a whole lot to his character other than arguably an unnecessary backstory.
Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about the whole UFC angle. Like, I understand what they're implying with the UFC thing, but I'm just not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. And it doesn't really seem like it paints the UFC in a great light for whatever reason.
No.
It's just kind of weird. It feels very kind of shoot in there. Like you said, it's a good plot device to explain why he's such a good fighter and how, he's unbreakable essentially. But I don't know. It's kind of a weird angle to have in the movie and just have it as this backstory. But when we first see Dalton, he is fighting, he's going like bar to bar.
Post Malone.
Yeah, he's fighting Post Malone in these, not necessarily in all of them, but he seems like he's kind of doing these underground fights, fight club kind of things where there's crowds and people betting. And he walks in the ring and Post Malone is like the guy who's fought 7 fights in a row this night. And he's taking all comers, and Dalton walks in and he's like, nope, I know this guy. I'm not fighting him for whatever reason. They don't really tell you at the beginning. You kind of, they reveal that as it goes, but he could just be an underground fighter kind of dude. And that would fulfill the prophecy that you're trying to like fulfill.
Or call me crazy, he could have been a career bouncer and just been a fucking badass like that.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, Dalton, maybe.
Right. They had a perfect backstory in the first movie. I understand them wanting to maybe get away from it a little bit, but it worked.
Yeah. And I don't know, it just added this extra layer that the other thing that's seemed weird about it is like, he's kind of like a small celebrity, like by just anywhere he goes. Like there's not everyone knows who he is in this movie, but there's certainly enough people that know who he is when he if he goes to, he doesn't go to a grocery store, but if he goes, let's say he goes to a grocery store, like the schmuck pushing carts in is like, "Hey, Dalton," or whatever, and he's wearing a fucking tap out shirt or something because he knows him from that. I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's. I'm embellishing it a little bit, but kind of.
So the story is this bar owner finds him in this underground fight, and she says, "Hey, I got this bar that I need a really good bouncer to come and help clean it up because I got a bunch of riffraff in here and it's running off the clientele. It's in the Florida Keys. I'll give you $5,000 a week for a month or whatever to clean it up. I'll give you $20,000 essentially. And I'll give you a place to stay. You don't seem like you got much going on in your life, so how about you come do this?" And he's like, all right. He agrees begrudgingly to go do this. And he goes down there, and the first night he gets in this fight, this epic fight, beats up these bikers. And then it seems like everybody knows who he is. So it's not that everybody recognized him immediately, but it's like it's like almost like it's a small town and a big thing happened. Something exciting happened in the small town and everybody knows who he is.
I don't feel like UFC has a star that if they killed someone in the ring, that anyone outside of UFC circles would know or care about it.
Right.
And if they did, coincidentally, the guy it would be is also in this movie, but not as the hero. Like, I feel like Conor McGregor would be the most likely guy that if you just went up to a man on the street and said, who do you like, name a UFC fighter, it'd either be Conor or Ronda Rousey. I feel like are the two that most people might know.
Yeah, like mainstream names.
Yeah, maybe Ngannou, maybe, but I feel like
I think that's a stretch.
Exactly. That's kind of my point. Is I don't feel like there's even if this like tragedy happened or fictitious whatever, I don't feel like it would be that well known outside of people who actually. So I guess in that aspect, it makes sense that Post Malone would know who he is because in theory he's a fighter in this movie. So
it fits in his interests.
So we get to the bar, and this bar is no longer in like Podunk, rural town. It's like in the Florida Keys, and doesn't really. It just feels like generic Florida bar to me, or maybe that's just me.
It doesn't have anything that really sets it apart,
right? From
being like the Keys just happen to be a location because there's water.
Well, there's water, there's an alligator, and there's lots of set pieces for what comes later in this movie. Kind of follows the script of Roadhouse a little bit. You see Dalton going and doing. He doesn't really
Dalton stuff.
Kind of, but not really. Like, he doesn't do the Dalton stuff. Like, he does kind of train the bouncers, but not really. Like, he basically just says,
he gives them pointers.
Go punch this guy. Yeah, like
when he has a knife, when he swings at it, step back and then step in and punch him in the face. And then they instantly level up and they know how to fight.
But he doesn't really spend time like learning the bar or doing anything like that. He's really just like, he almost comes off as the guy who's sitting at the bar drinking coffee, and when a fight breaks out, he ends the fight and then he goes back to his coffee, and that's about it.
Yeah, he definitely endears himself with the staff because he's the guy that can break up the fights or beat people up and get them to leave. And they kind of do it's almost like a montage, but not really, where they speed through. It seems like a couple nights come and go, but you find out that there's a guy that wants to buy the Roadhouse or get rid of it because his dad helped develop the island, and he has this resort that he wants to develop, and the Roadhouse is the last piece of property in this footprint that he needs to build this resort, but they aren't giving up. It has a very much like Rescue the Rec Center kind of 80s movie feel to it about this. Like, Dalton's there he's going to save the rec center. He's going to start his own fucking GoFundMe or something to, I don't know, raise funds or something.
I kind of agree with that, but the problem I have with that, and this is again kind of playing on the original, is in the original movie, the Double Deuce is almost its own character within the movie. That bar has a feel, and like when they go into that bar, you can almost smell like the stale beer, the cigarettes, and like all the that bar smell. You could feel it. It looks like a lived in like Roadhouse bar. And that lends to everything that they try to build up with this bar in this, and it's just called Roadhouse in this, if I remember right. Like, they don't have a name for it. It's just that there's a bar there. Yes, it's technically a bar, and they kind of forced an homage to the original with the chain link fence and or the chicken wire fence and the band playing. But aside from that, there's nothing about this bar that really feels unique in any way other than it being a plot point for this movie.
It definitely just feels like a tiki bar.
Yeah.
On the side of the road.
Somewhere around this point, we get introduced to our first big bad of the movie, which is just some random like knucklehead on a crotch rocket, essentially, or were they on Chop, whatever. Because really, one of the things about this movie is you essentially get three bad guys. You get the first guy who I don't even remember his name. He's just like some generic dirtbag number one who is like
Dell.
Yes, close enough. He's a computer.
I'm a computer.
He's got like 5 goons with him who are like kind of knuckleheads that kind of Three Stooge their way through a couple fight scenes. And then eventually he comes back and Dalton beats the shit out of him. And then, well, he's gone. And then somewhere around that point, you see they never call him a mob guy, but they kind of imply that he's a mob guy because his dad's in jail. And this real estate, the guy who's trying to buy Roadhouse or get them out of there. And Conor McGregor shows up. I don't know. He feels like he's just ripped out of like a children's comic book movie, like that kind of villain, but naked for some reason. I don't even remember why he's naked at the beginning of this, when he shows up in this movie.
He's having relations with a woman who's married, and the husband comes home and he jumps out with no clothes on, which I don't understand. He's this big badass. Why don't you just beat the guy up, take his clothes? Why do you have to run away?
Yeah, so speaking of that, how many roids do you think he was taking to get buffed up for this movie? Because this is the puffiest. Again, we both watch UFC. This is the puffiest I've seen Conor McGregor.
He's huge in this
his
movie.
Entire run as a fighter. Yeah, but he looks like a WWE guy more than a UFC guy.
Yeah, very true. And side kind of note, not related to the movie, but I've seen a lot of stuff lately where people suspect that he's like on certain.
Oh, yeah.
He's got CTE, he's on meth, he's like all these different things because of interviews that he's done post this movie. Not to be confused with Post Malone, post this movie, but he just seems like his normal self. The thing, when Conor McGregor shows up, I actually really enjoyed the movie up until the point he shows up. And I don't know if it's because of my bias about how much I don't like Conor McGregor, not necessarily as a fighter, but as like a human being. I don't think he's a good person. I think he's a really bad person.
I was going to say, I was trying to watch this movie, trying to not associate Conor McGregor, the human being, with Conor McGregor, this character.
His lines all sound like they're dubbed.
Yes.
Like it sounds like he didn't record very well when he was acting, so they had him come back in and do ADR, voiceovers and stuff. And it's really weird. He just really drags the movie down with how, I don't know, he
feels like he's acting in another movie and they just superimposed him into this movie.
Yeah, almost. He is definitely a villain that if the point is that you are absolutely hate this guy because he's the villain and he's just a bad guy, like a lot of really great villains are characters that you really don't like, but you can kind of relate to, or maybe you like them because they are just so over the top. But there's something about him that he puts together the perfect combination of being a really bad villain, like a really bad guy, and having absolutely no redeeming qualities that would be like, this guy's a real shithead, but he's cool. Like there's something about him.
Or he's funny, or
something.
Whatever.
He's just a total schmuck, like a shithead. You would never want to be around this guy. He's like the opposite of charismatic. He sucks all the air out of the room.
Right.
Just being this character. It's like they told him, hey, be yourself, but times 100, and add on being 100 times more of an asshole. And the strut that he has, just him in general, anytime he's on screen, I'm just like, can this guy die already? Can we just get to the end where he's going to be the guy that beats up Dalton, and Dalton's going to beat him back up. And can we just get that plot point over with?
Well, and almost to piggyback on the weirdness of Conor McGregor in this movie, and maybe this is just me, but I'm curious if you kind of saw or felt the same way. I think it's really strange that in a movie that you hired Conor McGregor to be in, a guy who's known for being a professional fighter, way more than being a professional actor, so much of these fight scenes look fucking terrible that he's in. They look super AI produced.
Yeah, CGI.
They look very unrealistic. Like just the move, and again, maybe this is biased one way or another because I've watched Conor McGregor fight quite a bit, actually fight quite a bit. Just the acrobatic way that he's fighting about it. Like I was saying this to my wife, and I still feel this way. I feel like if you're going to hire Conor McGregor to be the bad guy in a movie like Roadhouse, you're kind of hiring him with the understanding, we're going to punch you in the face quite a few times because you're someone we can hire that we know can take a punch in the face and get up and send a punch back. I feel like that would lend to this is a far-fetched movie to begin with, but for lack of better wording, it would lend to the realism of what this character is in a movie that's remaking a movie that is essentially the ultimate bar fight.
And the fighting very much feels like a video game cutscene, like motion captured. It feels like an Avengers movie or something where they're fighting Thanos.
Fast and the Furious is how I felt.
Yeah, and it's just they're people. There's no need for, they're not superheroes. They don't have any powers. They don't have, some kind of innate ability. It should look realistic. I don't want to compare this to the original but the original was all stunts, was all people. And this movie, they try to push the action so over the top that it just becomes like kind of draining to watch, I thought.
Yeah, I actually found myself quite bored with it by about the 3/4 point. I wouldn't say I was watching at that point, but the more they kind of pushed on this AI fight, whatever shit they were doing, I was just like, can we just move this shit along? And there's other stuff that happens in this movie that also kind of made me feel that way, but it very much so felt draining and dragging by a certain point of this movie.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like up to about the hour point of the movie, I was really enjoying where it was going.
Right about before Conor McGregor shows up.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you get to the point where it's like you're learning the backstory of Dalton. You kind of get the UFC angle on it, and that's fine. I mean, it fit. It was fine. It wasn't done poorly or anything. And then you get to the point where you're kind of learning a little bit more about him. He's starting to build a rapport with the people working in the place. The first group that you mentioned, the biker kind of dipshits that come in the fight.
Yeah.
There, even that fight looks somewhat normal.
I thought him slapping the guys around was hilarious.
Yeah, it was great.
I thought that was a really good way of saying, I'm going to fuck you up, but I'm also restraining myself. And it worked really well for that.
Yeah, I'm giving you a chance to fuck off.
Right.
And you're not going to take that opportunity. So we're just going to have to fight and I'm going to have to knock your shit around.
Right.
Totally makes sense.
That worked.
Yes.
Yeah, that was a good scene.
But then we get the Conor McGregor part that come in and it's very just elevated. Everything becomes over the top from there. The fighting becomes over the top. Brant, the developer guy, over the top. Him being this rich guy. Then you find out the love interest, who we haven't even talked about yet, because it's such a small part of the movie. The love interest's father.
She could not even be in the movie, and I don't think it would make all that much of a difference.
It only really makes any kind of difference towards the end of the movie, and it barely makes a difference. It's like a little plot point. Honestly,
with how drawn out this movie is, it almost would have worked better to just leave it out and try to tighten up some of the movie a little bit, because there are I don't know, there's a lot of things that feel like they're missing in this movie. And again, that comes to me, that boils down to a lot of comparing it to the original, which you shouldn't do, but you kind of can't help but do at the same time because it is a remake. If this movie wasn't called Roadhouse, let's just say this was called Bar Fight O'Connor or whatever,
Corner Bar.
I think I would have a whole different opinion of it. And frankly, I probably wouldn't have even watched the entire movie. I don't think I would have given it a chance because it wasn't called Roadhouse. So I understand why they did it, because obviously that shit works. You call a movie Roadhouse, this movie has a built-in audience. You're going to get people to watch it, whether they like it or not. You already sold your Amazon Prime subscriptions or tickets or whatever the case may be. But I don't know. That's what keeps giving me problems with this movie. What I keep going back to is there's really nothing about this that's fun quite the same way, or gives you that same I don't even want to just say 80s action feel, but that stupid action movie feel where it's this is just a bunch of dumb shit strewn together, but it's entertaining. This feels more like just a bunch of shit strewn together. Some of it can be entertaining, but a lot of it just leaves you kind of wanting a little bit more, or in the case of Conor McGregor, a lot of bit less.
And the thing about the movie too is Jake Gyllenhaal. I like Jeeky. I like Jake Gyllenhaal as an actor. I think he generally does a really good job. In this movie, I feel like he's a very endearing character. He seems like a good guy, even though he's been on the wrong side of this thing. And that's where in the intro I said, this movie should basically be called Roadhouse, Don't Make Me Angry, You Won't Like Me When I'm Angry. We won't get into the plot point of what that's all about, but some of the ridiculous of the movie is there are people that have guns. Guns exist in this universe, but they are not effective because they try to use them too close to people, or it just never works out. If this was any realistic portrayal at all, especially this being Florida, everybody would have a gun. They just walk in the place and shoot them. Problem solved.
Also, knives exist in this universe and are used and are about as effective as paper cuts. Maybe
you could have a paper clip and just jab somebody a few times and it would be the same effect. I mean, people shrug it off. It's silly.
I'm pretty sure. I mean, again, this is early in the movie, so I don't feel bad saying this, but I'm pretty sure if you get stabbed around the kidney, you're probably not going to go get in a bar fight with Conor McGregor in any character form, in the next week or so. We'll just say.
Well, he did have to ride a bus down there.
Okay, 2 weeks. I think after 2 weeks, your staph infected, kidney wound would probably still not feel very good if a pro fighter kicked it, or he doesn't kick at all, which is something he does a lot. So whatever.
McGregor kicks.
I digress. In the movie?
Yeah, he does a couple front kicks.
Did he? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then I forgot about him or something.
It was all the CG. It was too blurry. It was like Transformers when they first brought out the new Transformers movie, and everything just looks like all this moving kind of garbage. And it's, oh, that's Optimus Prime right there. No, that's a bunch of swirling, blurry garbage. I don't know what that is.
Right.
That's kind of how the fight scenes are in this movie. So I could totally forgive you for not seeing the one or two front kicks that happen in the 30 minutes of action that happened throughout the movie. And that's generally, when you say 30 minutes of action in an action movie, that's a good thing. But I think the 30 minutes, because they're so, again, to harp on this, it just looks so fake, and it could be practical and look so much better. You wouldn't get stuff where people are doing like the suplexes and the fucking brain busters and shit that they're doing, the wrestling moves that they're doing in this. These guys are, that's the other thing. These guys are UFC fighters. Like, if you really wanted to incapacitate somebody, you would break their arm, you'd break their leg, you'd get them in a submission, you'd choke them out. You know, if you really just wanted them to stop what they were doing, rather than the continual like Dragon Ball Z, like cloud of dust and arms and legs and shit like flying out of it and hitting people, and it moves around the bar. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you may as well have that.
No, I know what you're saying. You're absolutely right. And I also think it's weird that there's so much of this movie that takes place outside of the Roadhouse. There are full on, not just fight scenes, but like car and boat chases and, you know, a very obviously foreshadowed, I don't remember if it's an alligator or a crocodile, but, you know, it's one of those, Dalton is renting a houseboat or staying in a houseboat essentially. And they're like, oh, be careful. There's a, again, alligator out there.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't remember which one it is.
I think it's alligator. I think you're right.
Alligator.
Mm-hmm.
So they go, oh, there's an alligator out there. You know, you don't want to get eaten by him.
Hint,
like,
hint.
I wonder if that's
nudge,
gonna,
nudge.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to come back to play. And it comes back several times. But yeah, the third act of this movie, like before it ends up back in the bar, it goes full like Fast and the Furious, like triple X, the movie, not the genre, you know, action sequence.
Yeah,
of boat chases and all this. And that,
extreme stunts.
Again, in theory, you say that, like, oh, cool, that sounds exciting and fun. But like, by this point in the movie, I was sitting there, I'm like, this is really fucking boring to me. And maybe that's just me being stupid or overthinking it, but I found myself quite bored with this movie by the time it got near the end of it.
Well, I think that only means one thing.
What does that mean?
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
You want me to go first, or you want to go first?
Kick it.
Kick it. Unlike what you might or might not have seen in this movie. Yeah, this movie's kind of right down the middle for me. I'd give it an uneasy 5 bare knuckle bar fight hot dogs out of 10. There's redeeming things in it. Again, like you mentioned, Jake Gyllenhaal's great in this. I like him in general as an actor. I can't think of a movie off the top of my head where he's been bad in or that I didn't really care for him in. I'm sure it's out there, but I don't know what it is. He's good. He's fine in this movie. He dresses weird in it. I feel like his Hawaiian shirts that don't fit him quite right or look bizarre by the end of the movie, but I digress. But really, outside of him, I don't really care about any of these characters in this movie other than to maybe hate them. And that really has more to do with Conor McGregor or Knox and his boss, I guess, and Brandt. They're the only two characters that really stick out in this other than Jake Gyllenhaal, and not necessarily in a good way. This movie doesn't reinvent the wheel, which I wouldn't expect a reboot to necessarily do, but I don't feel like it really pays a good homage or like a good callback to the original movie either. Again, I think this movie might have been better served if it was called anything other than Roadhouse. But the flip side of that coin is I don't think anyone would watch it, or as many people would watch it if it was called something other than Roadhouse. It's not bad, but I would be kind of surprised if I go back to this one and watch it at all, let alone very often. And it certainly doesn't replace what the original one has to offer for me.
I mean, I've talked about a lot about remakes and how I'm not the biggest fan. And I feel sometimes we forget about thinking that maybe an idea can just be left alone. Like we don't have to remake everything. And like you're mentioning, if this wasn't called Roadhouse, maybe I would have liked it a little bit more. I generally do like where the movie was going. I like Dalton. I like the whole Roadhouse thing. I didn't even mind Brandt as a character because he's over the top, but he's kind of, he feels like he has a purpose. Like he's doing this for a reason. He's trying to kind of continue his dad's work, and his dad doesn't think that he's going to be able to do it. So he's got something to prove, right? He's got a chip on his shoulder. I think the movie starts to really go downhill, as I've mentioned several times, when Conor McGregor enters the movie, when Knox enters the movie, that's his character. It starts to just like, it's like a real quick downhill slide from there. I thought that first half of the movie felt exciting. It felt like it was going someplace. It felt like, I don't know, it just felt like they were starting to establish and build the world and build Dalton's character. But once we hit that second half, and especially the final act, the final confrontation, and then the in-credit sequence, it really solidified, oh, yeah, I didn't really love this movie. It wasn't great. And to mention specifically, I won't get into what it is, but the in-credit sequence, like what happens after the credits, like right immediately afterwards, and how it kind of sets this cliffhanger, or this kind of like, oh, maybe there's a possibility that there's going to be more of this, that knocked a point off. Like, I was going to give this 5.5, but I'm going to give it, because of that whole stupid thing, and that makes me not want to see, because I just don't want to see the next thing that they do with this. I got to give this 5 of the nicest Greyhound buses that you have ever seen out of 11 hot dogs.
I always like when we're pretty much in lockstep on stuff. I like when we disagree on stuff too, but
sure.
With this one, I felt like I needed some vindication, because I've heard so many people be like, it's not the original, but it's great and it's fun and it's exciting. I'm like, did I watch the wrong fucking movie? I
was totally expecting and seeing all the criticism. Well, not seeing all the criticism, but hearing that this wasn't a great movie, and hearing, oh, that's just critics. Critics are critics. They don't know what they're talking about. You hear that all the time about somebody like Roger Ebert, or somebody that, like, well, I never agree with what that guy says. So if he says it's stupid, then I'm going to go see it because I'm going to like it. I understand that point of view. And I was going into this with a totally open mind. Like, maybe it's pretty good. Maybe this could be, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. He's a good actor, but just once I saw it, it's just like, man, if they just cut out this one character and maybe made it like 20 minutes shorter, I would have really probably enjoyed this movie. But with the way that it is now, and the dubbing of all the Conor McGregor piece, he just really drug the movie down for me. If he wasn't in it, I'd probably give it like I don't know, maybe a 6 or a 7.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we'll never know where it would have gone if he didn't show up and do what he did, but that seems totally plausible to me. And I didn't start listening to reviews about this until after I saw it, because I do that a lot with this. I'll try to get other opinions. And like I said, a lot of times I look at it, I'm like, did I miss something here? Do I need to go back and watch this again before we talk about it? And this one, I was kind of feeling like maybe I need to watch this again. Maybe I just was having a bad night and didn't want to enjoy this or whatever. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I would love to have a new, I don't need it to be a Roadhouse movie, but that kind of movie that's just like an hour and a half long beat 'em up that's, super simple and just over the top and fun and ridiculous. I think both of us would be perfectly fine with having a new one of those, not necessarily a reboot or whatever, but that kind of movie. So I went into this hoping that's what we were going to get. And as soon as I heard Conor McGregor was in, I'm like, that's probably going to be detrimental to the movie. Like,
yeah,
knowing what what he is as a human, that doesn't help, but knowing his ring persona, his ring character, for lack of better wording, I was like, personal opinions aside, I can see why they would cast the guy like Conor McGregor for that kind, like for the bad guy in the movie. Because let's be real, like wrestlers have been getting roles like that for a long fucking time. So why not? A guy like Conor McGregor has enough name recognition that you could sell that, unless all the stuff about his, private life comes out and becomes more public, which I don't know how that hasn't happened yet, but that you can Google that on your own. We're not going to slander the man here. Or did we?
It just gets overwritten by the next stupid scandal about somebody doing something fucking stupid, and we forget about it, and everybody else does too. And they're the greatest guy because they did the thing that I remember they did that was cool. Whatever.
So, question of the week this week is, I don't know, I like this one. Is there a film or a film franchise that you would never watch if Hollywood decided that they were going to remake? So we're going to start on Facebook. We only have one response there, but we have a response there, and you can respond on Facebook. So we want to remind you of that when we get them there. And our friend John, who is not me, different Johns, has a whole list of movies, and I kind of feel like some of these have kind of sort of been remade, but not like straight up remade. So he says Back to the Future, Die Hard, Jurassic Park, The Matrix, Predator, Terminator, and Star Wars. Many of these have already shown us shitty sequels that should never have been remade. And that's kind of where I was saying a lot of these kind of feel like they have sort of been, like, I feel like Jurassic Park kind of has been remade, but they called it Jurassic World.
Yeah.
Predator is a whole different conversation. I feel like that's a weird franchise for a bunch of reasons, but I mean, with the exception of, Back to the Future and maybe Die Hard, the other ones I kind of feel like have had, whether it's a straight up reboot or like a sequelized reboot, that they've kind of done it.
But to John's point, they've done them poorly.
Well, that's also true.
Star Wars had a big anticipation. They make the prequels. Good. I don't need to see those. They made the whatever they call them after that, the sequels of the sequels.
New trilogy or whatever.
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. And those were just kind of forgettable. It's very it feels very much like a cash grab with all that stuff.
Yeah, well, without going overboard on it, I had said to him, I was like, as a jaded former Star Wars fan who feels indifferent to it now, if you could get that, let's just say for the sake of argument, if Disney sold the franchise to someone who's not Disney, whoever that might be at this point, and someone with like a strong vision for the story decided to take over and do it, I'd be on board with that. And I use the example of The Mandalorian before Luke showed up. Like, I think most of us people who liked Star Wars, at least for a while, really enjoyed The Mandalorian. And then eventually it just kind of got retconned into over-the-top nostalgia and all the same shit they do with all these movies. So I think there's that. I mean, I'm going to leave Back to the Future and Die Hard alone because those two arguably haven't really been fucked with yet. Maybe Die Hard. Die Hard's got some pretty bad sequels out there, but they haven't had a reboot. I think a lot of those, there's room to kind of fuck with them, but you're walking a tightrope because you're dealing with the whole nostalgia thing. It'd be easier just to kind of take the idea and call it something else, as we mentioned with Roadhouse. Switching over to Twitter, our friends over at Dissect That Film said, I'm too curious to ever ignore a movie that I'm interested in. Even if they remade Jaws, which hopefully they will never do, I'll be there to watch. Let's see, our friend Pearl at His Face X, she said, most remakes are trash and Rob Zombie remakes are extra trash. There are a few exceptions, but I would have a hard time watching a remake of Friday, Empire Records, The Fifth Element, or Death Becomes Her. Those are basically perfect as is. Over on X, at Dr. Snakes says, movie that Sean loves, Society, Guinea Pig, Flower of Flesh and Blood, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, Blood In, Blood Out, and Bound by Honor. I can't imagine that a Society remake would ever have a chance to happen in this day and age.
Yeah, it's like a perfect time capsule, that time in movie making. Basically, it's all practical effects, goopy, weird, gross. I think the social undertones and stuff, they're not really undertones, they're kind of overtones, are just, I don't know. Yeah, it'd be weird. It'd be weird to see that remade.
At Oddcast N also names one of Sean's favorite movies: Killer Clowns from Outer Space, American Werewolf in London, Death to Smoochie, Get Shorty, Goodfellas. I gave Cabin Fever a chance, but I hated that remake. Avoided Wrong Turn like the plague. If I had to bet, I would bet we get a Killer Clowns from Outer Space remake within the next 5 years, especially if this Terrifier movie does really well that comes out in December. I bet you that movie gets remade.
You think a remake or a sequel? Weren't they already talking about doing a sequel, or is that like a game or something they're talking about?
I don't know if it's out yet, but they were doing a video game.
Yeah.
But I could see that getting a remake for sure.
I could see a lot of these movies, instead of doing sequels, them just making games.
Does that make as much money? I don't know.
Yeah, it could. I mean, it could. It could be a smaller budget. It depends. It could be a bigger budget. I mean, games are all over the map as far as budgets and stuff.
I would have a hard time watching a remake of American Werewolf in London. That's one of my favorites, and I don't want to see that done in CG. I would be shocked to see Death to Smoochie get a remake, because I thought I was one of the only people that actually liked that movie.
I like it.
Okay, well, I'd still be shocked to see it get a remake, because that bombed pretty spectacularly, didn't it?
Yeah, lead balloon time.
Yeah, and Goodfellas, I mean, I guess you could retell Henry Hill's story again, but I don't think you could really remake that.
I think a lot of Scorsese movies are they're masterpieces. You know, they're either masterpieces or they're just so Scorsese that it'd be really hard to redo something like that.
Yeah, like I said, I think you could tell that story a different way, and there's certainly stuff in Henry Hill's life that isn't in Goodfellas.
Sure.
But I don't think you could remake that per se. Let's see, Punches in Popcorn. So at Punches in Popcorn is referring to Big Trouble in Little China, and they say there's only one Jack Bird. Again, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see that get a remake.
I think a lot of the fun in some of these kind of remakes is figuring out who they would cast in these parts. And I think most people generally go the route of picking an actor that looks like the previous actor, but I think it's almost more fun to think of an actor that fits the character more so than the look. But yeah, I don't personally see that being remade, but
I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Nothing's impossible.
Honestly. Like it's kind of like this. It's got name recognition to enough people that if they made it, they'd make their money back in the first night. So Porn Stash Podcast J, who is at Porn Stash WWYD, pretty great name, simply said Fight Club. Yeah, I don't think I'd want to see a remake of that either. That's such a uniquely David Fincher movie that I'd have a hard time seeing that again. Stu World Order at SWO Productions just said, nah. Very long answer.
Appreciate it.
And then at Loiside Sabrina said, The Crow. Well, you're going to be mad about that. Roadhouse. You're going to be mad about that. Rocky Horror Picture Show, that one I would be a little surprised to see get a reboot just because that one is so iconic and that is one of the definitions of cult classics that, I take that back. I could absolutely see that getting a remake. I just don't know who you would cast or how you would put it out there, but I could see that happening. They have a play, so why not do a movie? And then the movie Clue, which I've actually never seen that, so I can't speak to that one.
You also have to think, though, that the question is a remake that you would never see. So I think what they're saying is they wouldn't see The Crow, or this new Roadhouse.
It's a fair point. So, Sean, do you have any movies that would, if they were remade, that you would never see them?
Terrifier. Terrifier 2.
There's remake 2. They're not going to remake the first one, just the second one.
What I'm saying is that I could see with this making as much money as it is, getting as much cachet and it being such like this horror film du jour, it's like it's the hot thing right now, right? I could see
whether you like it or not, it is the next big franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down with that. I understand that. I don't like it, but that doesn't mean that,
that's a different conversation.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is I could see a big studio saying, hey, we want to remake this with a big budget. We're going to do it all crazy and fucking gonzo over the top. I wouldn't see those.
What if I think
the originals stand on their own. Like, I'm not a huge fan of them, but I think that the aesthetic and the look that they capture is fully unique to the respect that it is low budget, practical, it's filmed like this for a reason. What
if they remade it with a big budget and they had, instead of Art the Clown, they had Rob Schneider as a carrot?
Now you're on to something.
Any others or just Terrifier?
That's the only one I could think off the top of my head. I feel like I flip flop. Sometimes I'm like, they make all these remakes, but I understand. Like, I understand why they do it. I don't get upset about it, but I understand why they do it. Doesn't necessarily mean I'm interested, but that's the one off the top of my head that I could think of that's like a new movie that is, or newish, within the last couple of years, and they're making the next one comes out soon, that I wouldn't see a big budget remake of these movies.
As far as one that I wouldn't see, I don't think there's one that I would immediately damn to not seeing it just off the fact that they're remaking it. My two favorite horror things being Dawn of the Dead and Friday the 13th have both been remade, and I thought both were actually pretty good. One of them actually surpassed the original. I'll let you guess which one. You can talk about a movie like The Thing, which is arguably one of the best horror movies ever made, and that's a remake. So at the same time, there's no shortage of bad movies out there that have been remade, like Nightmare on Elm Street, which I'm sure we're going to get another remake of at some point. There's plenty of movies that I would say I'm not going to see, not so much because they're remakes, but just because they don't look interesting to me based off whatever they present me with at the time. But there's not like a title I can think of that inherently I would say I will not see that if they remake it just because it's untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
I'm boring. I have open mind. It's a bad thing.
A mind is just a terrible thing to taste.
To taste? I agree. Probably tastes like cheese and bong water. You got anything else you want to talk about before we tap out on this? Put on some Affliction shirts and roll into the clouded dust into the parking lot of a Roadhouse somewhere?
What are those shirts called? Jack Hardy? Is that what those things are called? I have Jack Hardy.
Did you just say I Jack Hard? That's a good way to end this episode.
I Jack Hardy. I have anything else to talk about? I'm just trying to think of other apparel.
All right. Well, Sean's jacking hard. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up, because apparently that's what's going on now. If you're not already, we would greatly appreciate if you were to give us a follow or a like on, whatever podcast platform you decide to listen to us on, be it Spotify, Apple, or any of the others. Check out our YouTube channel. Occasionally we put stuff on there. You can follow us on all the social medias at whoever we are, Dewey Pod Monster, at Dewey Pod Monster, or just search us. You'll find us. And of course, you can find all of our old episodes on our site, which is crap.town, or at yourunpodcast.com, as well as all the other great shows that are on the You Run Podcast Network. Sean, what do you have going on? What do you want to tell the people?
I was going to say, if you want your question of the week answered on this question of the week episode, portion, show, words, check us out on social media at Dewey Pod Monster. If you check out our show notes, we have links to all the stuff that we talk about. We talk about a bunch of different shit at the beginning of the show. We have links to all that crap. If you click some of those links, they are affiliate links. You can help contribute to the show. This show is a listener-supported podcast. And if you want to follow my Michigan beer adventures, you can follow me at youtube.drafttherapy.com, or on social media networks at Draft Therapy.
That's it. That's all we got.
Are you sure?
I was waiting for the "you lose, American asshole."
Oh,
You lose, American asshole.
All right, cheers. You complimented me last time. I'm probably gonna fuck it up this time though. So, all right,
remember
welcome back.
I don't remember how nice I was before. I apologize. You didn't give me a chance to cut in and say that.
I hope you kind of leave it all fucked up now.
Sorry, I had to fart.
God, I hope that ends up in this episode somewhere.